you went through a bit of a storm this year, to say the least, and I've been through many a storm in my life. I've been through many a media storm when the media came for me and wrote things about me, and I don't think anyone that's not been through that before understands how it feels. Because for me, when it happens to me, there's this real sense of injustice, and there's this desire for me to want to jump out and correct things and scream and shout and correct the world, but I also know that I can't. And when I saw, again, I didn't see anything, but I'm from afar looking at, social media. When I saw you going through a similar thing, my two things happened. The thing one was I wanted to understand the protocols of a man who writes about protocols, has a book coming out about protocols. I wanted to understand what he does in that situation and if he's any more immune than I am, because I'm certainly fragile in that regard. But then also I saw this other wonderful thing, which I think you've expressed there, is I saw your friends show up.
Mhm.
I saw them speak out about your character and who you actually are. And I saw them literally show up at your location. I saw someone like Lex Friedman show up for you.
Yeah, he showed up in my home several times. He was just there. Like literally one day I just like look up and Lex is in the room. It's kind of like a dream, right? Like Lex Friedman with the suit and the whole thing. And he was just there to just be there, you know? Yeah, that was a challenge. As you point out, the hardest thing about that, and I realize like most people who aren't public facing won't experience this, but I think everybody experiences something similar at some point in their life, especially now with social media, where things that are being said about you are just fundamentally not true. Fundamentally not true. And they're being cast in a way, in a context that is just wrong. And you want to say, no, that's not how it was, or the context is completely wrong, or there's a completely other side of the story that you'd love to tell, but either because of how that will land and how people misperceive or contort that, or simply because you have the etiquette and the respect to not do that, because there are sometimes many different parties involved, you refrain. And in our case, I decided to just mainly focus on the work at hand, although I've talked a bit about this on Jocko Willing's podcast. Happy to talk about it here. The pain comes from being potentially misunderstood, and also from the understanding that we didn't always necessarily do everything right. In fact, we may have made some mistakes. And the understanding that the public forum is not the place to work out the details of that. That's not how healing comes. Despite what people might believe, that is not how healing comes. And I don't care if it's a high school situation or a podcaster or a celebrity or a politician, that is just not the way that humans effectively settle their differences. There are consequences, but it's not how things really get settled. And I think we have proof of that given the last few years. So in that case, and I'm not trying to be diplomatic or, slalom through this, I think what I'm trying to do is make it effective and hopefully useful for everybody. What do you do when you're hearing and seeing things about you or others that you affiliate with that you just fundamentally disagree with? Well, you have three options. You can counter the narrative, you can say nothing, right? Or you can agree. And herein, I think, lies the challenge in being an adult, a real adult in the realest sense of the word. A real adult knows when to say, you know what? Some of the stuff they're saying, yeah, wish I'd chosen differently. But a real adult also knows to say, but some of the stuff they're saying, no, that is not what happened. That's not the context. And this is categorically false. Now, those things often are interdigitated, okay? Now, at the extremes, they're not interdigitated, but oftentimes they're interdigitated. And what people have to realize is that online, in comments, in certain forms of media, it's just highly skewed. You're getting just one perspective. In the context of science, we'd say this is like cherry picking data, looking at one particular portion of the graph or throwing out a bunch of experiments because the data weren't what you wanted, which in science is like terrible, only second in terms of terrible to actually making up data, right? Okay. So I think the challenge is so I know that the challenge in those circumstances is to do what in the end I ended up doing, which was to sit down and realize that was the circumstance I was in. And then to try and make a really good decision about what to do. And that, I do believe, is best achieved through having really good friends, really good coworkers, and family members who can be really clear optics for you when you don't always have the clearest optics, meaning they can hear your ideas and you can spitball what might happen in case A, B, or C. But it's not about being tactical. It's not about being strategic. It's about remaining true to yourself. And in my case, I just felt that I didn't want to get into the details. And at the same time, I acknowledge there's always a learning in these things. You asked whether or not knowing protocols can help. Well, certainly sleep was important. I managed to sleep. There were some days I slept less than others. People had theories. He looks tired, this and that. Sometimes that was related to earlier recordings that I tended to just push too hard anyway. Sometimes it related to, being kind of troubled about the circumstances. So I think that one can use physiological size. You can use non-sleep deep rest, and I certainly relied on those tools and continue to. Friendship and social support, getting a poll of opinion from people that you really trust. You don't want to get too many opinions often. You want to get just enough and just a variety of them that you can make the best informed decision. I don't really believe in polling 100 people about a circumstance and then taking a vote, pros and cons. The mind doesn't work that way. So in the end, I voted my conscience and I voted my heart by continuing to just put out content so people could learn about science-based tools for mental health, physical health, and performance. I think as time goes on, I may elaborate more on some of the circumstances, but I think in the end, people listen to my podcast because they're interested in getting better sleep, in exercise protocols, and hearing from the best scientists and clinicians so that they can better themselves in their own life. And people speculate all sorts of things. It's also interesting to see how we presume so much, not just about public-facing people, but about other people in the comments section. For instance, on my Instagram page, I have rules. It's classroom rules. You can call me names if you want. You can say most things, but I sort of treat it like a classroom. What would I tolerate in the classroom? And if people start attacking each other, you're going to get a warning. And if you keep going, I'm going to block you. Just because, first of all, it's my page, right? This whole notion that you're not allowed to block people is crazy, right? It's your webpage. It's your classroom.
Yeah.
You have every right. You can do whatever you want. I mean, where is the rule that says that you won't tolerate or that you need to tolerate whatever? People swearing at each other, very different to me than people swearing. So people can swear, fine. Swear at each other, well, then I'm going to say, hey, stop this. Do it again. You're done. At least here. Go elsewhere. And there's so much presumption. We think we know these people on the internet, and we really don't. On the other hand, there's certain people like Lex, like you. I'm really delighted in this conversation. Like Rick. I like to think like me, like I am who I am. Now, you're not seeing every dimension of my life, but frankly, you're not supposed to. And I think there's this inherent desire to know everything about everybody that we see online and comment sections and on Instagram. And frankly, it's inappropriate. I grew up in an era where that wasn't right. In fact, my father once told me, he's from Argentina, and he said, there's this funny thing in the United States. You go into somebody's office and they've got all these pictures of their kids facing outward. He said, you go into somebody's office in certain parts of Europe or in South America, and the picture of their family is facing them. So on my dad's desk in his office, when I was a kid, he had a picture of me and my sister and my mom, and it faced him. Because those are for him. He wasn't like, here are my kids, here's my life. And I love that. That's kind of how I was raised. You keep certain things inward and certain things are outward. So I don't know, that's the model I was raised with, and I rather like that. This notion that we have to share every aspect of ourselves on social media is crazy, and I think it's actually detrimental.
If I was a fly on the wall when you were going through that, what would I have seen? And what I'm trying to add, the reason I'm asking this question is super clear, because if you were a fly on the wall when I was going through some of my hardest times, you would have seen someone that was really struggling.
Okay, so I'll say this. That was definitely not my hardest time. Hardest times for me were the door's locked. I'm 14. I'm like behind locked doors. I don't know if I'm going to get out when I'm going to get out. I called the one person I knew would pick up, a guy named Steve Shrugi, who was my team manager for Thunder and Spitfire Wheels. I called him. I said, Shrugi, what am I going to do? I'm locked up in this place. And his response was, bro, you're the most normal guy I know. What am I supposed to do? I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Yeah, that was scary. That was like, what do I do? I'm 14. I have no agency. I don't mean like marketing agency. I had no ability, like no money, no anything. No, it worked out. Other hard times, that time I talked about July 4th after that fight. What am I going to do with my life? I'm a complete loser. Other times, I've had this weird karma with mentors. I've had 3 amazing scientific mentors, and the relationship between mentors in science, mentor and students in science, used to be much closer. You'd get really close. My undergraduate advisor was an amazing person. My graduate advisor was like a mother to me and was a truly amazing individual. And my postdoc advisor, also incredible, and I was incredibly close with all of them. And it was suicide, cancer and dead at 50, cancer and dead early 60s. Like 3 people I was super close with. And when Ben, the third guy, died, I thought, well, there's only one common denominator. That's me. I thought I was cursed.
Really?
Yeah. I'm like, I work for you, you die, And I was like, shit, like what is going on here? But then I did what I only know how to do, which is you transmute the pain into useful things. And I started thinking, okay, how do I want to spend the rest of my life? I want to be of service. I want to take what I know in science. I want to teach people things that help them. And I didn't know exactly how I was going to do that, but it birthed the podcast. I also had 3 dead mentors. I was a scientific orphan. In science, there's also a lot of trying to live up to the reputation that they expect of you.